My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm not supposed to be alive to tell you this. I didn't believe in demons, not in the real sense. I believed in fear, in guilt, in the way the human mind can twist shadows into something worse, but not in something that waits, something that calls you before you even know it exists. If you're hearing this, understand one thing. I didn't go looking for that place. I was invited. And now I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't a person who sent that invitation, it was something beneath it. The journey there should have been normal. It wasn't. The driver barely spoke the entire time, and when I gave him the address, he looked at me through the mirror like I'd said something wrong. He kept driving, but slower, like he was hoping I'd change my mind. About 10 minutes out, the road narrowed into something that barely looked used, trees closing in from both sides, blocking out the light. That's when my phone lost signal. Completely. No warning, just gone. I tried to ignore it, but the silence in the car started to feel heavier, like the air itself had thickened. Then, without saying anything, he stopped. We weren't at the gate. Not even close. I told him this wasn't the location, but he just shook his head, muttered something under his breath, sounded like a prayer, and told me he wouldn't go any further. Before I could argue, he drove off, faster than he had the entire trip. I should have taken that as a sign. I didn't. The rest of the walk felt longer than it should have. The path was narrow, almost hidden, like it didn't want to be found. Dry leaves cracked under my feet, too loud in the stillness, each step echoing in a way that didn't feel natural. And then I noticed it, there were no sounds around me. No birds calling, no insects, no wind moving through the trees. Just my breathing, my footsteps, and something else I couldn't quite place. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of one, like the world had gone quiet on purpose. When I finally reached the gate, I stopped. I didn't plan to, my body just did. It was rusted, old, barely holding together, but that wasn't what held me there. It was the feeling. Like standing at the edge of something you don't understand, but deep down you know you shouldn't cross. My hand rested on the metal longer than it should have, and I remember thinking, if I leave now, nothing happens. Everything stays normal. But something in me, something I still don't understand, pushed the gate open anyway. The sound it made was wrong. Too loud. Too sharp. It cut through the silence like it didn't belong there. And for a second, just 1 second, I thought I felt something respond. Not around me, but below. Like whatever was under that ground had heard it. I froze. Listened. Nothing. I told myself it was just the echo. Old metal. Empty space. That's all. The convent came into view slowly as I walked further in, rising out of the trees like it had been hiding there the entire time. It was bigger than I expected, older too, the stone dark and uneven, like it had absorbed years of weather, or something worse. The light around it didn't look right. The sun was still out, but the building seemed dim, like it was pulling the brightness out of everything near it. The windows were tall and narrow, and every single one of them was dark. No movement. No life. Just empty spaces staring back at me. I remember thinking, this place doesn't feel abandoned, it feels occupied. Just not in a way I understood. I kept walking, even though every step felt heavier than the last. The closer I got, the stronger that feeling in my chest became. Not fear. Not yet. Something deeper. Like my body was trying to warn me about something my mind couldn't see. Then I reached the steps. And before I could knock, before I could even raise my hand, the door opened. Slowly. Quietly. Like it had already been unlocked. Like someone had been standing on the other side, waiting for the exact moment I arrived. A nun stepped out, dressed in white, her posture straight, her expression calm, too calm. She looked directly at me, not surprised, not curious, just certain. Like she already knew who I was. Daniel Carter, she said softly. Not a question. I felt something cold move through me. I don't know why, but hearing my name like that, it didn't feel like a greeting. It felt like confirmation. I forced a response, something polite, something normal, but my voice didn't sound right even to me. And then I saw her eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't kind. They were empty. Not distracted. Not tired. Empty. Like there was nothing behind them at all. "Welcome," she said. And then she turned, stepping back inside, expecting me to follow. I hesitated. Just for a second. Long enough to realize something I couldn't explain. Everything behind me, the trees, the path, the world I came from, it already felt far away. Like it didn't matter anymore. So I stepped inside. The door closed behind me without a sound. And just like that, the silence followed me in. The first thing they told me wasn't welcome, not really. It came after the door closed, after the silence settled around me again like it had been waiting. The nun who brought me in didn't smile, didn't offer comfort, didn't ask if I was tired from the journey. She just looked at me for a moment, like she was measuring something, and said, "There are rules you must follow while you're here." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, something firm, like these weren't suggestions. Like people who didn't follow them didn't stay long. I nodded, trying to keep things normal, trying to convince myself this was just how isolated religious places operated. Strict discipline. Order. Silence. That's what I told myself. But even then, standing in that narrow hallway with dim light barely reaching the corners, I could feel it. This place didn't run on routine. It ran on control. "There is no leaving after dusk," she said, turning and beginning to walk, expecting me to follow. I did. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the stone floor, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the thick air. "You will remain in your quarters once the evening bell is heard. No exceptions." I wanted to ask why, but something about the way she said it stopped me. Not fear exactly, more like the sense that the question had already been asked before, and that the answer hadn't gone well for whoever asked it. We passed a series of doors, all closed. No voices behind them. No movement. Just that same heavy quiet pressing in from every direction. "You are not to enter the lower chapel," she continued. That made me look at her. "Lower chapel?" I asked before I could stop myself. She didn't slow down. "You will not go near it," she repeated, ignoring the question entirely. That was the first moment something felt clearly wrong. Not strange. Not unusual. Wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't leave room for misunderstanding. Places don't just have forbidden sections without reason, and people don't avoid explaining those reasons unless they're hiding something. I said nothing. "You will not interfere with night prayers," she added. "I wasn't planning to." "You will not observe them either." That stopped me. I don't know why that one unsettled me more than the others, but it did. There was something in the way she said, "observe," like it wasn't just about privacy. Like seeing it mattered. We turned a corner, and for a brief second, I thought I saw movement at the end of the corridor. A figure. Still watching. But as soon as I focused on it, it was gone. Just shadow and dim light playing tricks. I told myself that's all it was. "You will not question the routines of this convent," she said. That one almost made me laugh, but it died before it reached my throat. Not because it wasn't absurd, but because she had stopped walking. Slowly, she turned to face me. For the first time since I arrived, there was something different in her expression. Not emotion. Not quite. Awareness. "Do you understand?" she asked. And for a moment, I couldn't answer. Because standing there, looking into her eyes again, I felt something I couldn't explain, like I wasn't the only one being addressed. Like something behind those words was listening for my response too. "Yes," I said finally. The word felt heavier than it should have. She held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded once, satisfied, and continued walking. We passed another hallway, this one darker, the light barely reaching into it. I glanced down it without thinking, and immediately wished I hadn't. The air there looked different. Not physically, not in a way I could describe, but it felt thicker, like the space itself was heavier. And for a split second, I thought I heard something from that direction. Not a voice. More like a low, distant sound. Rhythmic. Almost like breathing. I looked away quickly. "That wing is restricted," she said, without turning, without seeing me look. Or maybe she had. I didn't. "You don't need to," she replied. We reached a small room at the end of the corridor. She opened the door and stepped aside. "This will be your quarters." It was simple. A bed. A small desk. A window that barely let in any light. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. And yet, stepping inside felt like crossing another line I couldn't uncross. "You will hear the bell at dusk," she said from the doorway. "When you do, you will remain inside. No matter what you hear." That made me pause. "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, her voice was softer than before, but colder. "Do not respond to it." A chill ran through me. "To what?" I asked. She looked at me then, fully, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that made it impossible to look away. "You'll know," she said. And just like that, she stepped back and closed the door. No sound. No footsteps leaving. Just silence again. I stood there for a while, trying to process everything she'd said, trying to fit it into something reasonable. Strict rules. Isolation. Religious discipline. It had to be something like that. It had to be. But as I moved further into the room, setting my things down, something caught my attention. The floor. At first, I thought it was just dirt. Dust carried in over time. But when I crouched down and looked closer, it wasn't spread evenly. It was gathered. Thin lines of it running along the edges of the walls, like it had been pushed there. Or pulled. I reached out, brushing my fingers lightly against it. It wasn't dust. It was soil. Fresh. And for a brief moment, just a moment, I felt something shift beneath the floorboards. Not loud. Not violent. Just enough to make me freeze. Just enough to make me slowly pull my hand back. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit since I got there. The rules. They weren't meant to control me. They were meant to protect me. From whatever was beneath us. I don't know how long I stayed awake after that. It felt like hours, maybe longer, just sitting on the edge of that bed, staring at the door like it might open again. I kept replaying her words in my head. No leaving after dusk. Do not respond to it. Trying to make sense of them, trying to force them into something normal. Eventually, exhaustion won. I lay down without undressing, eyes open in the dark, listening, waiting for something I couldn't name. The bell rang. Not loud. Not sudden. Just a deep, hollow tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It didn't echo. It didn't fade. It just settled into the walls, into the floor, into my chest. I felt it more than I heard it. One slow toll, then another, then silence. And right after that, it started. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A low sound, distant, almost beneath hearing. I held my breath to listen better, and that's when I realized it wasn't outside my room. It was inside the walls. A slow, rhythmic murmur, like voices layered over each other, too deep, too uneven to be human. Not chanting like prayer, something older, something that didn't follow any language I knew. It rose and fell in a pattern that made no sense, like it wasn't meant to be understood, just felt. I sat up slowly, my heart beginning to pound in a way I couldn't control. The sound grew clearer, not louder, just closer. It felt like it was moving, not through the halls, but through the structure itself, like the entire building was carrying it. And then the floor shifted. Not enough to shake anything. Not enough to make noise. Just a subtle movement beneath my feet, like something pressing upward, testing. I froze. Every instinct in my body told me not to move, not to breathe, not to acknowledge it. The voices changed. They weren't distant anymore. They were right below me. I could feel them now, vibrating through the wood, through the thin frame of the bed. The rhythm became uneven, breaking, twisting, and for a moment, just one moment, I thought I could make out words. Not clearly, but close enough to understand they were trying. Trying to become something I could recognize. Trying to reach me. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just something I could block out. It was inside the room, inside the floor, inside my chest. My breathing got shallow, my vision tightening as panic started to take over. And then, it stopped. Completely. No fading. No final sound. Just gone. The silence that followed was worse than anything I'd heard so far. It felt aware. Like whatever had been making that noise had stopped because it knew I was listening. I stayed still for a long time. Minutes. Maybe longer. I don't know. I just waited for it to start again. It didn't. What came next was worse. A soft sound from the hallway. Footstep. Slow. Dragging. Uneven. I turned toward the door, my throat tightening as the sound came closer. Another step. Then another. Not walking normally, more like something learning how to move, one step at a time. It stopped right outside my door. I couldn't breathe. The handle didn't move. There was no knock. Just presence. Heavy. Silent. Waiting. And then I heard it. A voice. So, almost a whisper. Daniel? My blood went cold. It wasn't loud. It wasn't distorted. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. Like someone I knew. Like someone I trusted. Daniel opened the door. My hand moved before I could stop it, fingers twitching toward the handle. My mind was screaming at me not to, every warning echoing in my head, but the voice. It sounded real. It sounded safe. Please. The word cracked slightly, like whoever, or whatever, was speaking was struggling to hold the sound together. I stood up slowly, my body moving against my own will. My hand reached the handle. I could feel the cold metal under my fingers. And then I remembered. Do not respond to it. My hand stopped. The silence on the other side of the door shifted. Not sound, something else. Like the air itself had changed. The voice came again. Closer. Right against the wood. Daniel? But this time, it wasn't right. The tone was off. Too stretched. Too thin. Like something repeating a sound it didn't fully understand. My stomach dropped. I stepped back. Slowly. Quietly. And that's when the door handle moved. Just a little. A soft, careful turn, like whatever was outside was testing it. Then it stopped. Another pause. And then, a slow, deliberate scratch ran down the length of the door. Not from fingers. From something sharper. Longer. I backed away completely now, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. The scratching came again, deeper this time, dragging down the wood with a sound that made my teeth clench. Then silence. I stood there, shaking, staring at the door, waiting for it to break open. It didn't. Instead, I heard the footsteps again. Slow. Dragging. Moving away. But not down the hall. They moved across the walls. Above me. And then, beneath me. The floor shifted again, harder this time, a faint thud coming from below, followed by that same low, impossible sound. Not voices. Not anymore. Something else. Something waking up. And in that moment, standing alone in that room, listening to whatever was moving beneath the convent, I realized something that made the fear worse. It hadn't been trying to get into my room. It had been trying to get me to let it in. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed awake with the light off, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the door like it might start breathing if I looked away. At some point the silence changed again. Not safer, not calm, just thinner, like whatever had been moving through the convent had pulled back. Waiting. The bell didn't ring in the morning. There was no signal that night had ended. Just a faint gray light forcing its way through the window, like the day itself was hesitant to enter. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. Too empty. Not a single sound of movement, no footsteps, no distant voices, nothing that suggested other people were living there. And yet the air felt used, disturbed, like something had passed through recently and left no trace behind. I stepped out anyway, forcing myself to move, to act normal, even though nothing about this place felt normal anymore. I needed answers. And the only place I knew I wasn't supposed to go was the only place that might have them. The forbidden wing. I didn't ask for directions. I didn't need to. I remembered the corridor from the night before, the one where the air felt thicker, heavier, like stepping closer to it meant stepping out of reality and into something else. I told myself I'd just look. Just confirm there was a logical explanation. Old buildings have sealed sections all the time. Structural damage. Storage. Something ordinary. But as I turned the corner and saw it again, I knew that wasn't true. The hallway looked darker in daylight. Not dim, dark. Like the light refused to go any further. I hesitated at the entrance, my body already reacting before my mind could catch up. Every instinct told me to turn back. That whatever was down there wasn't meant to be seen. That the rules weren't there to control me, they were there because something had already gone wrong before. But curiosity, or something worse, pulled me forward. The first step felt wrong. The air changed immediately. Colder, yes, but not in a natural way. It felt stale, unmoving, like it had been trapped there for years. My breathing sounded too loud, too sharp against the silence, and each step echoed in a way that didn't match the distance of the walls. The deeper I went, the more the space felt stretched, like it wasn't built to hold what was inside it. The doors along the corridor were different from the rest of the convent. Older, correct? Some of them slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness behind them, but not enough to see inside. I tried not to look, but it was impossible not to feel like something was just on the other side, standing there, watching through the gap. Then I saw the markings. At first, I thought they were just old symbols worn down by time. But as I moved closer, I realized they weren't fading. They were scratched in. Repeated over and over across the walls, the doors, even the floor in some places. Religious symbols, but distorted, inverted, twisted into shapes that made them feel wrong to look at. Crosses bent at unnatural angles, circles broken and reconnected into something else entirely. And layered beneath them, something older. Symbols I didn't recognize, carved with a kind of desperation that made my chest tighten just looking at them. This wasn't decoration. This was containment. Or at least it used to be. I reached one of the doors that was slightly open and pushed it wider before I could stop myself. The hinges didn't make a sound. Inside, the room was small. But, except for one thing. The walls were covered. Not with symbols this time, but with writing. Pages torn from books, journals, scraps of paper, all pinned, nailed, or pressed into the stone. Some of the ink had faded, but most of it was still visible, layered over itself in different hands, different styles. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the words, trying to make sense of them. They weren't prayers. They were records. It responds to sound. Not asleep, never asleep. We thought it was beneath the ground, but it is in the structure. That learns. My throat tightened. These weren't ancient writings. Some of the ink looked recent. Very recent. A page near the center caught my attention. It was different, cleaner, more deliberate. Like it had been written slowly, carefully. The lower chapel is not a place of worship. It is a mouth. I stepped back instinctively, my pulse spiking. That didn't make sense. It couldn't. But the longer I stood there, the more the words felt right. Not logical. Not reasonable. Just true. A sound behind me made me freeze. Not loud. Just a faint shift. Like something adjusting its weight. I turned slowly. The hallway outside the room looked the same. Empty. But the air had changed. It felt tighter now, like the space itself had noticed me. Like I had crossed a line that wasn't meant to be crossed, and something was reacting to it. Then I heard it. Not from the walls. Not from the floor. From deeper down the corridor. A soft dragging sound. Slow. Uneven. Moving toward me. My chest tightened as the memory of the night before hit me all at once. The footsteps. The voice. The thing outside my door. It wasn't gone. It had just moved. And now, I was closer to it. I stepped out of the room slowly, my eyes locked on the far end of the hallway. The darkness there felt thicker than before, like it was hiding something just beyond sight. The sound came again. Closer this time. That same uneven rhythm, like something trying to imitate the way a person walks, but getting it wrong. I didn't wait to see it. I turned and started back the way I came, my pace controlled at first, then faster, then just short of running. The air felt heavier with every step, like something was pushing against me, trying to slow me down. Then I heard it. Right behind me. Not footsteps. Breathing. What? Too close. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because something in me knew, if I saw it, if I gave it that much, it wouldn't stop it following. It would recognize me. I reached the edge of the corridor and stumbled out into the main hall, the air shifting instantly, the pressure lifting just enough for me to breathe again. I didn't stop moving until I was far from that place, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. And even then, I could still feel it. That presence. Not in the hallway anymore. Not behind me. But below. Watching. Waiting. Because whatever was in that forbidden wing wasn't trapped there. It was just closer to the surface. I found her in the chapel. Not the main one. This was a small, narrow side room with candles burning low, their flames trembling even though there was no wind. She was sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, rocking slightly, whispering words I didn't understand. At first I thought she was praying, but the rhythm, the tone, it wasn't right. It was nervous, broken, like she was repeating something to keep herself sane. Her eyes snapped open when she noticed me, wide and frantic, and for a moment I saw pure terror staring back at me, real, raw, human terror. I knelt down, trying to speak softly. "Are you okay? What's happening here?" She shook her head violently, tears streaking her face. "No, you don't understand. You can't understand. You have to leave." Her voice was panicked, but not the normal panic of fear. This was panic soaked in recognition, like she'd seen the end of something no one should ever see. "I need to know," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Tell me what's going on." She laughed. Not the light kind. A short, strangled laugh that ended in a sob. "They don't worship God. At night, they don't pray, they don't kneel, they don't sing, they feed it." I froze. My mind tried to process the word, tried to rationalize it. "Feed it? What do you mean?" Her eyes were wild now, darting around the room as if the walls themselves were listening. "Beneath us, in the lower chapel, it's alive. It's old, older than this convent, older than anything you've seen. And every night they bring offerings, they chant to it, they keep it asleep by feeding it, or it wakes. And if it wakes..." She broke off, shaking violently. Her body went rigid for a moment, staring past me as if she could see something creeping along the stone walls. "Wake," I whispered. Her lips trembled, forming the word too slowly. "Will," she gasped, and then a shadow fell across her face. She turned, eyes widening in horror, whispering, "They're coming." Before I could react, the chapel doors slammed open. I didn't hear footsteps at first, only the sudden displacement of air, heavy and sharp, like the world had contracted around us. Figures moved in the doorway, sisters dressed in black shadows, not the white I expected. Their eyes glinted in the candlelight, empty, merciless. The young nun screamed, a sound that tore through my chest, and I grabbed for her arm, but it was too late. They were upon her, hands clamping over her mouth, dragging her backward with inhuman strength. She kicked, thrashed, begged, her cries mixing with the echo of the stone walls, but the sisters didn't hesitate. And then she was gone. The room felt different after that. Not empty, not silent. Something had arrived in her absence. A chill that wasn't from the stone. A weight pressing down, like the air itself had learned to suffocate. The candles flickered violently, shadows twisting along the walls, stretching, forming shapes that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me. From somewhere below, far below, I heard it. A low rumble vibrating through the floor. Something breathing, massive, waiting. Not a growl, not a roar, just awareness. And then a whisper, so faint I almost didn't hear it. "Another one sees." I couldn't stop shaking. Every sound in the chapel, the candle flames, the distant dripping of water, even my own ragged breathing, felt amplified, like it was meant to alert it. And for the first time, I understood why the sisters followed those rules so strictly. It wasn't about devotion. It was about survival. And if that young nun hadn't screamed, I might not have noticed how close it already was. How long had it been watching? How long had it been waiting? And most importantly, would it notice me next? I followed the whispers that night, though I told myself I wouldn't. I stayed in my quarters for hours, listening to the convent settle, to the air thicken, to the walls groan in ways that made no sense. But eventually, curiosity, or maybe fear, pushed me out. The hallway was empty, silent, the candles dim, but I knew where to go. I could feel it, something beneath the convent pulling me, drawing me toward the forbidden, toward the lower chapel. The door at the end of the corridor was slightly ajar, blackness spilling from the crack. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to turn back. And then I saw them. The sisters. Not in the hall. In the chapel. All of them, faces hidden beneath hoods, moving in a slow, deliberate circle around something that made my stomach drop. It was alive. Not like an animal. Not like anything natural. A mass of shadow and sinew, writhing beneath the stone floor, rising through the cracks, glistening wet and enormous, as if it had been sleeping and stretching at the same time. Eyes, too many eyes, blinked open along its surface, watching, studying, tracking every movement. And the chanting began, low at first, growing louder, not words I recognized, not prayers, something else. Something ancient. I realized with a sudden, nauseating clarity what the nun had meant. They weren't worshiping God. They were feeding it. Feeding it flesh, feeding it sound, feeding it attention. The circle moved closer, and I saw what they held, small offerings, pieces of meat, scraps of something I didn't want to think about. One sister knelt and pressed her hands to the floor, and the creature pulsed in response, the floor shaking with a slow, violent heartbeat that matched the rhythm of their chant. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But my legs refused. My mouth refused. I was trapped, frozen, as the shadows shifted along the walls, stretching, twisting, coming alive in response to the ritual. And then the creature moved, slowly, deliberately, through the cracks, a tendril of darkness slipping out, brushing the sister's hand as if testing her, acknowledging her offering. And then it turned toward me. Not fully, not yet. But enough. A presence, vast and hungry, aware of my eyes, aware of my intrusion. The sisters didn't notice at first, caught in their devotion, but the moment it sensed me, the chanting faltered. One sister looked up, and I saw her eyes, empty, hollow, yet gleaming with something unholy. She hissed a word I didn't understand and pointed at me. And the circle moved. Slow, deliberate steps toward me, the stone floor thrumming beneath my feet, the creature beneath pulsing like a heartbeat that wanted me to feel it, wanted me to respond. I stumbled backward, crashing into the wall, and one of the sisters laughed, a low, cruel sound that carried through the chamber like a warning. The air thickened. The shadows deepened. The floor cracked in places where I swore it hadn't before, as if the creature was spreading beneath me, reaching, smelling, testing. The smell hit me then, foul, metallic, sharp, like iron and decay mixed with something older, something I couldn't identify without gagging. I realized then that the convent had been built on top of this thing. The sisters, the rituals, the rules, they weren't pious or religious. They were survival. Each chant, each offering, each night of feeding kept it asleep, kept it contained, kept it from rising fully into the halls. And I had broken the first rule by even being here. I turned to run, but the shadows shifted again, blocking the doorway. The sisters closed in silently, their faces blank, the chanting starting once more, this time louder, more insistent, and beneath it, the creature pulsed with a rhythm that made the walls themselves shake. I could feel its awareness, probing, curious, hungry, smelling my fear. And then the youngest sister, the one I had tried to talk to before, stepped forward. Her eyes were wild, frantic, and for a moment, she looked human. She whispered something to the creature, words I couldn't hear, and it paused, stretching one massive tendril toward her, acknowledging her submission. The others kept chanting, and the creature pulsed faster, responding to their rhythm. I realized then that I wasn't just witnessing a ritual. I had walked into the very heartbeat of the convent's darkness, and it had felt me, and now it knew I was here. I didn't know if it would attack. I didn't know if the sisters would let me live. I only knew the thing beneath the convent had tasted my fear, and it wanted more. I had to see it for myself. The ritual had shaken me in ways that no warning, no story, no instinct could prepare me for. The convent seemed quieter than ever that night, the corridors empty, the air heavy with the scent of wax and decay. I knew I shouldn't go. I knew every instinct in my body screamed to stay put, to hide, to pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. But something drove me forward, something darker than fear, curiosity, defiance, a need to know the full truth. The lower chapel wasn't just a room. It was a cavern. Stone walls stretched into darkness that swallowed the weak light of my torch, floor cracked and jagged, and from those cracks, faint tremors pulsed beneath me, as though the building itself was alive. I stepped carefully, each footfall echoing like a scream. The air was thick, choking, smelling of iron and damp soil, of something that hadn't breathed for centuries. And then I saw it. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. A vast shadow moving beneath the cracked stone floor, tendrils of darkness writhing as though the cracks were veins, pulsing with life. Eyes, too many, too large, too glimmering, opened along the shadow's length, reflecting the torchlight in a way that made them seem alive, aware, sentient. They watched me, each blink deliberate, testing, calculating. I realized the truth then. It hadn't just been sleeping. It had been building, learning, spreading beneath the convent for decades, maybe centuries, feeding through the sisters' devotion, growing stronger each night. And I had walked straight into its gaze. The chanting began again, soft at first, almost ceremonial, rising from the shadows like a tide. I could see the sisters now, lined along the edge of the chapel, heads bowed, hands pressed against the cold stone. But their faces were blank, empty, possessed by something beyond comprehension. They weren't human in that moment. They were conduits, vessels keeping the thing below in check. And then it moved. One tendril rose through the largest crack, brushing a sister's shoulder lightly. She didn't flinch. She whispered something in a language older than the convent itself. The shadow pulsed in response, stretching and rippling through the floor, sending vibrations up my legs that felt like the pulse of a living nightmare. I stumbled back. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the exit was now behind me, blocked by shadows that weren't cast by anything visible. The creature sensed me fully now. Awareness spread from it like ice through my veins. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was prey. And then I understood. The convent wasn't built to honor God. It was built to contain it. To contain this. Every rule, every ritual, every warning I had been given, they weren't acts of faith. They were safeguards. Every sister had known the truth, and every night they fed it, whispered to it, kept it asleep. But it was never meant to be permanent. I felt the floor beneath me shift violently, a low, grinding sound that echoed in my chest. Dust and debris fell from the cracks, and the tendrils twisted higher, reaching for the sisters, reaching for me. One tendril, thicker than a man's arm, shot upward, brushing my side, cold and wet and alive. My skin crawled as if I'd touched a corpse and a snake at the same time. I screamed, trying to wrench myself free, but the air thickened around me, holding me in place, pressing, suffocating. The chanting grew louder, frantic now. The sisters' movements became jerky, mechanical, their voices sharper, pleading, forcing the creature downward, into its cage of stone and fear. But it didn't want to be contained anymore. Its awareness roamed freely beneath me, testing the walls, searching for weakness. And I realized something worse than death. It didn't care about killing, cared about knowing, about feeling, about feeding. Every heartbeat I had, every shiver, every panic-fueled thought, every breath, it was tasting it, learning from it. I was a lesson, a meal, a stimulus. I had come seeking truth. And now, the truth was staring back at me through the cracks in the floor, in the glimmering eyes, in the pulsating darkness, and I knew. I wasn't leaving this place unchanged. I wasn't sure I would leave at all. The air turned wet before I even reached the stairs. Not rain, not condensation. Something alive, thick, clinging, like the building itself was sweating, bleeding darkness. The lower chapel had been only the beginning. The whispers, the footsteps, the low, wet breathing beneath the floorboards, they all led here. The stairs descended into nothing. Not just darkness, but a black so complete it swallowed the torchlight, a black that pressed against my eyes and lungs, pressing me backward even as I forced myself forward. Every step made the wood groan, but the sound didn't echo. It was absorbed, devoured by the space below. I gripped the railing, and it pulsed beneath my hand, alive. Tendrils of shadow slithered along the walls, reaching toward me, brushing my skin, sticky, cold, urgent. I stumbled, nearly falling, my torch swinging wildly, illuminating shapes that shouldn't exist, twisted figures with hollow eyes, their mouths opening and closing without sound, faces of past victims, frozen in terror. I wanted to run, but the descent didn't allow it. The staircase stretched impossibly downward, spiraling in a way that made the floor above feel distant, unreal. Each step I took, I could hear it beneath me. The thing beneath the convent, the creature the sisters had been feeding for decades, was moving in its prison. Not fast, not slow. Perfect. It knew me. It was aware. And it was hungry, not just for flesh, but for fear, for life, for understanding. The walls began to bleed shadows, pulsing, writhing, as if the building itself had come alive to keep me inside. One tendril shot across the stairwell, scraping along my shoulder, and I screamed. The shadow burned like ice, freezing every nerve ending, yet leaving a sensation of fire beneath it. I stumbled further down, heart hammering, lungs screaming for air. The chanting from above had stopped. Silence now, full and oppressive, pressed against me like stone. And then I heard it, a low, resonant growl, vibrating through the steps, the walls, the air, a sound not meant for humans to survive hearing. I reached the bottom, finally, and there it was. Not fully revealed, not yet, but massive beyond comprehension. Tendrils of darkness twisted, forming shapes that defied geometry, eyes opening and closing across its surface, glimmering like coals in the black. Its mouth, or what I assumed was a mouth, opened slowly, revealing a void, a hunger so deep I could feel it in my chest. The floor cracked beneath me, and from the fissures came whispers, millions of tiny voices, screaming, begging, pleading, all merging into a single, pulsating heartbeat that seemed to resonate with my own. The sisters appeared then, emerging from the shadows around it. Their faces were blank, eyes shining with devotion and fear, their hands pressed against the floor, whispering words older than the convent itself. One step wrong, one breath too loud, and they would drag me into the ritual. And then the creature pulsed, testing, probing, reaching toward me with every dark tendril, stretching further, faster, its hunger undeniable. I ran, blindly, through the cavernous chamber, torch swinging, shadows lashing at me, whispering my name, calling me, tasting my panic. The walls began to shift, the floor cracking underfoot, revealing glimpses of the mass beneath, a body so vast it would take centuries to know it fully. I could hear it learning me, shaping its awareness around my fear, calculating, patient, infinite. And then it spoke. Not words, not a voice. A thought, pushed directly into my skull, deep and cold. "You see me!" I screamed. The shadows surged, the walls pulsed, and the air became thick with the scent of iron, earth, and decay. I understood then the final truth. It didn't want to devour me. It wanted to make me part of it, to teach me what the sisters already knew: submission, obedience, recognition of something older, hungrier, eternal. I tried to run, but the stairwell was gone. The walls had swallowed the exit. The darkness wrapped around me, binding me, pressing, squeezing, pulling me toward the center where the creature waited, aware, awake, unstoppable. And in that instant, I realized I wasn't descending into a place. I was descending into it, and it had already noticed me. I thought I had escaped. I thought the stairs, the darkness, the twisting corridors had been the worst. But the convent doesn't let you leave. Not really. Not alive. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the chapel. I wasn't in the hallway. I was back in my quarters. The candlelight flickered weakly. Everything looked the same. Too familiar. Too safe. My chest heaved. I told myself it was over. That I had survived. That it had been a nightmare. Then I noticed the floor. Thin, subtle, like veins, stretching across the wooden lines I hadn't seen before. And from them, faint, wet pulsations, as though something beneath the floor was still alive. Watching. Waiting. Learning. A soft sound behind me made my blood run cold. Not footsteps. Not a door. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Familiar. I turned. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted, forming shapes that shouldn't exist, twisting, writhing, coalescing. And then I saw her, one of the young sisters, the one who had broken before, kneeling silently in the corner. But her eyes were mine. I stumbled back. My reflection. Or something worse. Something that had learned to mimic. Not a human smile. A dark, impossible smile that split the air with its silence. The whisper came then, echoing inside my skull, not through my ears. You belong beneath. We are one now. Panic surged. I ran for the door. It didn't open. The walls pulsed, the floor beneath me shivered, and the air thickened, pressing against my chest. Tendrils, thin but impossibly fast, shot from the cracks, coiling around my ankles, wrists, even my throat. Every attempt to resist only drew them tighter, like they were weaving me into the creature itself. And then I saw it fully. Beneath the floor, through the cracks, a mass larger than the convent itself, eyes glowing, maw gaping, tendrils writhing. And for the first time, it moved upward, not through the doors, not the walls, but through me. Not into my body, into my mind, into my awareness. It wasn't just alive. It was me. I screamed, and my voice wasn't mine. It echoed with 100 others, the sisters, the victims, the whispers that had haunted the halls for centuries. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed me. And in that darkness, I understood the final horror. I hadn't escaped the convent. The convent had escaped me. And now, I am one of them. Watching. Waiting. Feeding. The Black Mass Sisterhood never sleeps. And neither does it forgive.